I'm Renee. I am the owner and artist behind Chicly Reclaimed Decor, and on today's tutorial for Paint Couture Paint, I'm going to be sharing with you how I do my paint pours, how I layer them with resin, and then how I embed them with crushed glass, pigment powders, all of the fun things to create a super fun and unique piece of resin art on top of a jewelry box just like this. So if that is something that you have been interested in learning, stick around guys, because that's what I'm going over today. Okay, so when I'm doing resin pours, whether that be on top of a piece of furniture or on a jewelry box like this, I do not like to have this lip or ridge, but rather a smooth edge for the resin to pour off of. So what I do is I take an 80 grit sandpaper and I sand back that edge so that it's nice and smooth. Again, so the resin has a smooth edge to flow off of. In the end, I find that my resin self-levels better and the look of my pours looks more natural. Okay, so now that our edges are nice and smooth and our wood top is ready, we are ready to start the next step. I am going to tape the underside of this piece I'll be doing my pour on, and this is a super helpful tip that I picked up because as you pour your resin, it will drip off the sides. And when your resin has hardened or cured, those resin drips are almost impossible to get off without having to sand. By taking the time to do this step, in the end, cleanup of your resin topped piece is super easy, especially with the tip that I'll be sharing with you guys later on in my video, so stay tuned for that. Once I have my tape where I want it, I need to cut off this extra so that way my tape is flush with the edge. But instead of using an X-Acto knife to do this part, I'm gonna take a 240 grit sandpaper and simply sand off the excess. All right, now that everything is all taped, we are ready to start on the top. I'm going to just simply start by painting this top with Candlelight. This is part of the Colors by Sweden collection by Paint Couture. Paint Couture paint is a water-based acrylic mineral paint that has a built-in top coat to it, so you want to make sure you stir thoroughly before you begin. Next up, we are ready to start mixing our paints for our paint pour. I'm going to be showing how to use Paint Couture's Pure Concentrated Pigments in the color white. By using this product, I'm actually able to color the pouring medium itself, saving me on product in the long run. I use Floetrol, but you can use any pouring medium of your choice. I'm going to start by measuring out 4 ounces of Floetrol. I do not weigh out my product. I usually just measure it out and kind of eyeball things. Making sure to stir your product before you use it, I'm going to measure out just a drop at a time of this heavily pigmented product. A little of this stuff goes a very long way. Altogether, I used only 5 drops of this concentrated pigment to achieve this white color. And then I usually add 1 to 2 tablespoons of water. I know I have the right consistency of my paint when it flows smoothly off the back of a spoon. Now I'm going to show you how I mix up some paint with Floetrol. I'm going to start by showing you how I use Paint Couture's Rose Gold. This is part of their original metallic paint line, and it does have actual metal in it. And I prefer to use it in my paint pours versus the Luxe Metallics because of this specific detail. Well, why is that? So different pigments have different specific gravities, aka some colors are heavier than others. So in theory, as your paint sits after a pour, some paints rise while others fall. I'm going to be doing a 1-1 mix, 1 part paint, 1 part Floetrol. Once again, make sure you stir thoroughly, and I'm gonna add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of water until it flows nice and smoothly off the back of my spoon. Some of the other colors I'm using in this pour are Carbon. I also have this beautiful custom color created using modern terracotta tinted with candlelight. And then here's that rose gold color that we mixed up earlier. We used pale gold. Again, this is some of the original metallic paint by Paint Couture. And lastly, we have our white that we created using the concentrated pigments. But before we start pouring, we cannot skip one crucial step. You have to make sure the surface on which you will be pouring is even or level. That way, when you pour on your product or your resin, it won't all slosh off to one side. Okay, now we're getting ready to pour. I'm gonna be doing a flip cup technique for this pour. So we are gonna start layering my cup. I am gonna start out with white and then layer my colors successively from there. I do not add any kind of oil to my paints. I create cells and patterns by how I add my paint to my cup. Pouring down the side creates blocks and patterns of color. I'm gonna do that with the rose gold and the custom tint of modern terracotta. By pouring back and forth with maybe a splotch here and there, I create veins and other variegated color patterns. I did this with both the pale gold and the carbon. This is what our cup looks like after all of that. To finish things off, I'm going to take the white and the pink and pour them in the middle. This is going to blend all of our colors together like this, and we're officially ready to start our pour. Again, before you pour, make sure your surface is level. I'm going to take my cup and I'm going to flip it upside down onto my piece. While that rests, I'm going to take some white and put that around. This is going to make it so that the white blends underneath the other paints. And then I'm going to simply remove my cup in a rotating manner and move my paint from corner to corner. Underneath my paint pour, I usually line it with either waxed plastic bags or parchment paper. That way I can reuse the paint skins in earrings or another project, so none of this paint here will actually go to waste. I like to make sure that all the edges got a good layer of paint, and then I'm going to take my heat gun and slowly warm the surface, which will bring any bubbles to the surface where they will pop on their own. One of my favorite things about paint pours is watching the patterns that emerge over time. While my paint is still wet, I'm going to take Paint Couture's Sheer Frost, which is this crushed German glass glitter. It is absolutely gorgeous. And I am going to simply sprinkle it and follow it along the natural vein lines that you see in the pour. Next up, I'm going to take flakes of gold and sprinkle them on in the same vein-like pattern. I love doing this because these flakes are all different kinds of sizes, so when you layer resin over top, it really adds depth and dimension to your resin work. This is an up-close look of what we have so far. Next up, while my paint is still wet, I'm going to use the Perfect Pigments in the color Silver Galaxy. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take it and I'm going to simply just sprinkle it over my paint pour. Sometimes I'll get a little heavy-handed with it, and then I'll blow on it, and then tap it into the paint. I really like doing this because it adds like a metallic speckled look to the design. Again, here's a close-up look at the design we have so far. After my paint pour has had time to cure, I like to top it with Envirotex Pour On High Gloss Finish epoxy resin. This is a 2-part epoxy resin that requires you to mix equal parts A and B. When you're working with resin, please make sure to have the proper PPE, gloves, and a mask. One of my favorite investments as far as resin supplies has been my silicone mixing cups. They're reusable and they're already pre-marked here as far as measurements. I'm going to be measuring out 4 ounces total, so 2 ounces of part A and 2 ounces of part B. Once you have your product all measured out, the important step of mixing begins. You need to make sure that you mix your resin thoroughly, being sure to scrape the bottom and the sides. If you do not take the time to make sure to thoroughly stir your epoxy, you can end up in a literal sticky situation, as your epoxy will not cure and can remain tacky. But before I lay down any resin, I'm going to take alcohol and clean the surface on which I'm going to be putting my resin pour. I do this because it removes any oil buildup and dust, which are factors that can affect your resin, causing you to have a failed pour. Once again, before you lay down any resin, you need to make sure that your surface is level. That way you are sure to have a successful pour. I'm going to pour my resin over top, and I like to use a thick piece of stock card paper to move my resin around and make it even over the top. It's kind of the same concept as if you were frosting a cake. Working section by section, I start off on the back and then I move to the sides, slowly pushing the resin over the lip on this jewelry box lid. This allows the resin to flow evenly over these curved edges. And once the sides are done, you can see here I move on to doing the same thing to the front lip on this jewelry box. Once that's done, I'm going to go back and forth over top with my heat gun to remove any air bubbles. Next up, I'm going to start embellishing this pour with crushed glass. Before I began, I already had a design in mind for how I was going to be laying down this glass. Once I have my glass down, I'm going to add some resin over top here. Again, I'm going to be working with Paint Couture's Sheer Frost, and I'm going to be adding this over the crushed glass. I love the texture this gives, as well as the added shimmer. Next up, I'm going to take Paint Couture's Gold German Glass Glitter, and I'm going to add a little to the crushed glass, but mainly I'm going to add it to those gold vein lines that we put in our paint pour earlier. Next up, we're going to be working with some Perfect Pigment Powders. First up, this is Pink Sapphire. It is this beautiful, rich, rosy pink that is metallic. And I'm going to use this to not only color the crushed glass, but we're going to also create some really cool vein lines later on. As you can see, I'm simply just sprinkling this mica powder over the glass and then here and there over the rest of the resin. I'm going to take the Mayan Gold and I'm going to do the same thing, sprinkle it around randomly, but this time I'm going to take my heat gun and as you can see, I'm just pushing it around in the resin. This creates a super cool variegated gold pattern. I'm finishing it off by adding a little resin over top of the crushed glass, a little bit more German glass glitter here and there, as well as some more Mayan Gold pigment powder over the other half of the glass. I'm going to go over this one more time with my heat gun to remove any air bubbles. This is a peek at what it looks like while the resin is still wet. And this is what it looks like out in the sun after it's cured for 24 hours. Now I'm going to follow those exact same steps and add one more layer of resin to add even more depth and dimension to this pour. I'd also like to share with you my trick for how I remove the tape as well as the resin drips, so that way you can easily clean up your resin art. Using my heat gun on a low setting and making sure to move back and forth, I'm going to heat up the edges, which in turn will warm the resin up, allowing me to easily remove my tape, revealing a nice clean line. And this is the finished resin art design. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'm Renee, the owner and artist behind Chicly Reclaimed Decor. You can follow me for more furniture flips as well as painting tips, and definitely be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more painting tutorials using Paint Couture paint.